the midsize ERP software Crossroads, how Accenture recently acquired faculty, and whether or not SAP's days as a market leader are over. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 257 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, and welcome to Transformation Ground Control, the tech-agnostic podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including the strategy, people, process, and technology sides of transformation. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. So, Darian, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for this episode today.
Yeah, so it's going to be a good episode. It's going to be very controversial, just to warn you in advance. Two of the three topics that we're going to cover here today, or two of the three segments, I should say, are likely to be triggering for some and hopefully a good conversation for all. And what we're going to cover today first is we're going to start off with some social media questions that we've received across different platforms. And then we're going to get into some of our newsworthy topics. We'll talk about Accenture's acquisition of faculty and what that means to the tech space, and how DXC has launched Amber. We'll talk about what that all means. And then later in the show, we are going to have Kerrie, Jordan, and Jose Gomez to talk about mid-market ERP software and how that industry is at a crossroads. And the context for that conversation is Epicor's recent announcement that they are going to be shifting more of their R&D dollars and support to cloud and SaaS-based solutions and away from on-prem. So we'll talk about what that means to the middle market, not just Epicor customers, but just the middle market in general. So we'll have Jose from the user community perspective, and then Kerrie is actually from Epicor, so we'll get the vendor perspective on that as well. So that should be a really good conversation. I'm excited for that one. And then later in the show, we'll talk about how SAP's days as a market leader might be over and what some of the cracks in the foundation of their strategy and future longevity might be, at least in my opinion. So all that being said, let's jump into some of the social media questions we've gotten, Darian.
Yeah, the first question today is, what is the mechanism by which ERPs fail? Is it something specific to businesses with established processes, or are medium-sized businesses also affected when they increase in size and adopt an ERP?
That's a great question. I think that first and foremost, the reason why projects fail is oftentimes much deeper than the technology deployment itself. A lot of the time we see situations where an organization is not aligned organizationally, their operations are a bit of a mess, and they're hoping that technology can be a Band-Aid or a silver bullet to fix some of those problems. And the bad news with technology is that it can't fix those problems, that only you can fix those problems. And until you do fix those problems, you're highly unlikely to be successful in your technology transformation initiative. So that's why it's so important to take the time up front to get that stuff right, to make sure that you have a clear vision and strategy for what it is you want to accomplish with technology, ensure that you're all on the same page at the leadership level on down, and also to make sure that operationally you understand what it is you want to be when you grow up. Because a lot of times, to the person's question, when you grow as a company and you evolve and you change your business processes, it can be easy to think that technology will come in and fix that for you as you've developed multiple variations of different processes and it's morphed into sort of a mess of inefficiency. It's easy to think that technology itself will fix it. But if you don't know what it is you want to get out of that technology operationally and strategically and organizationally, you're not going to be able to be successful. So it is really important, whether you're a mid-market company, large company, small business, whatever it is, it's important that you take that time to get that right up front. And it's a common misperception that ERP implementation failures are limited to big companies. The reason you hear about them more often is because they're usually involving household names that are more fun for media and people like me to talk about than an average mid-sized company that no one's ever heard of. So I'd say the failure rates, there is no correlation between company size, at least none that I've seen. I think it's the more foundational stuff that you need to get right that's more the predictor of whether or not a company is going to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're going to talk about this video later, or we're going to play it later for the audience and then talk about it. But we have a comment from it on YouTube, and it's, okay, let's assume the SAP dominance in ERP is over. Then which systems are the most serious competitors for big enterprises today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I saw that come through as well. And it does beg the question when we watch this video later, I'll be curious to get the audience's feedback. But in the video, I talk about how there's problems with the way SAP is treating its customers and approaching its product roadmap. Short term, I think it's fine for the most part, but long term, I think it's going to create more problems. And I think some of the actions that SAP and other large vendors are taking right now is fairly short-sighted. I think there's going to be a backlash to a lot of what they're doing longer term. But having said that, you think, okay, what if there is a backlash? What if I'm right and SAP is not the number one player that it is today? And, we've seen in history of enterprise tech that market leaders come and go. When I first started, it was Bond. Bond was a huge player in the ERP space when I first started, but obviously no one's really using Bond these days, or at least no new customers are deploying Bond. Now it's SAP is the market leader. So the question is, if and when does SAP's dominance end? And when that does happen, who's going to take their place? I think you've got the other tier one larger software vendors like Workday and even Salesforce that you could argue those aren't true enterprise grade ERP systems per se, but they do provide platforms that larger organizations or mid-sized and smaller organizations too can build competencies on or capabilities on. So I think you've got some incumbents that are already in the space like Salesforce, Workday, maybe Microsoft Dynamics if can handle your needs, or if you're in the right industry where that functionality fit makes sense. But I think, when you look beyond just traditional ERP, traditional monolithic ERP, I think that's where the real breadth of options comes into play, because now you've got integration tools, you've got platform as a service where you can be creating more platform-oriented approaches to where you have more flexibility. That's where Boomi and MuleSoft have really taken off. Palantir from an interoperability perspective. Rapid is another one from an interoperability perspective. So a lot of different options out there. I think I have a feeling it's going to get more fragmented in the medium term, and then eventually someone's going to shake out as the winner in all this and maybe overtake SAP as the number one player. I don't know who that would be. And they may be someone that doesn't exist right now. That's the other thing. Maybe a vendor that I've never heard of. And there are plenty of vendors I have not even heard of. And every day I get contacted by people from different software companies that I've never heard of that may or may not be the next big thing. But there's a lot of them out there. So long way of saying there's a lot of different directions that could go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super great questions. I know we'll get more into that later in this episode, but I want to switch gears and get into our first newsworthy article of the day. And this one is about Accenture and how they acquired faculty and why that matters. So Accenture just announced it will acquire faculty, a UK-based AI firm known for applied AI in government, defense, healthcare, and regulated industries. This isn't some typical buy some AI talent deal. Accenture is explicitly saying its acquisition isn't about scaling AI capabilities across its entire global client base, not experimenting with the edges. Faculty brings deep data science, model development, and real-world deployment experience, not just flashy generative AI demos. In short, Accenture is really doubling down on AI as a core delivery capability and not an add-on service. Some just other bigger takeaways is this acquisition is a signal that the consulting model itself is changing. The traditional system integrators built power around ERP expertise and implementation skill. Now that power is shifting toward owning AI talent, controlling AI delivery frameworks, and becoming intermediary between enterprise data and AI outcomes. So this isn't really just about Accenture buying faculty, it's Accenture repositioning itself for an AI-first consulting era Eric, I wanted to get your take on this overall, see if you heard about it, what your first reactions were, all those things.
I had not heard about it, but it makes a lot of sense, and I'm not surprised by it. As you were saying it, though, it did make me wonder, does this just change their view or their approach to technology? When I say they, I mean Accenture. Does it change their commitment to platforms like SAP and Oracle? In some cases, I know Accenture has large practices in those areas. They've also got the Microsoft D365 practice. So it makes me wonder if the bias that comes along with owning a technology like that, if that will create a whole new bias for customers that then need to be navigated. From a pure business perspective, it makes sense because Accenture doesn't own SAP or Oracle, the product itself, but they obviously have built big practices around it. In this case, if they own the technology and they can build practices around it, I would imagine that's a smart move financially. But I do wonder if that's the right option for customers. Are they becoming more of a technology company that's just going to push and peddle that product, or are they going to be capable of being more agnostic than that? And that's a question I don't know, what their plans are to roll that out.
Yeah, absolutely. One question with this too, how should enterprises think about data ownership when consultants are building and owning AI models?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's true for software vendors too. You've got consultants now building AI models. You've got software vendors building AI models where they own customer data. You do have to wonder, at what point does the customer say, hey, hold on, we should be the one training our own data model? That maybe that's a core advantage or competitive advantage potentially for us as a company. I think AI is so new that maybe, the masses haven't really thought about that yet. We haven't gotten to that point of maturity, but I have to think that's forthcoming at some point in the future where if not the CEO, maybe the CFO or others that are concerned about risk and intellectual property and preserving competitive advantages, someone at the strategic high level of leadership has to be thinking about that. Because I think there's a quiet loss of control, a quiet loss of intellectual property, a quiet loss of information and data about your own business that's happening in the industry right now. And it's not something that's talked about. There's sort of a leakage of IP and competitive advantage. The leaking is coming from customers. They're leaking all this stuff knowingly and willingly to software vendors. And I do wonder if that just continues the trend now that Accenture is going to own a platform that potentially houses a bunch of customer information.
And with your point there, do you think that almost like, we talk about ERP lock on here or lock in or on here. Do you think that's becoming like AI lock in some senses?
Yeah, true. It's a good point. I mean, I think you could see that happening where you get AI lock, although AI is so new and experimental for a lot of companies that I think they're trying different options and different approaches. I'd be curious to see if any meaningful large companies go to Accenture and say, okay, we're all in on this faculty AI platform, just have at it and do a big deployment and you'll house all of our data in it. That'll become our AI tool of choice. I don't know. Like, I don't know enough about that specific AI tool, nor do I know if that's going to happen. Because right now, at least at both the individual work level and at the broader enterprise level, there's just so many options. You have Copilot and you have ChatGPT, and the ERP vendors are building their AI models. So there's just so many different options. It's hard to imagine, at least in the short term, that customers are in mass going to want to consolidate it and double down on one platform, knowing that it's going to evolve and change in the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question here, is this the future of consulting, or do you think that this is a sign that traditional delivery models are under threat or could change rapidly?
Definitely change rapidly. I agree with that part. I don't know if they're dead or not. I think this is probably a way for Accenture to stay relevant, and if they can buy a technology and control the product and the services behind it, maybe that's just a way for them to keep their scale and keep their relevance. I don't know. I do think the large consulting model of having a few 100,000 consultants throughout the world, many of them doing grunt work that can be done by AI, I think that model is dead. So this is probably a natural evolution to try and stay alive and relevant in the consulting space.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting. But I want to get into our next newsworthy article of the day, which is DXC launches Amber at the CES 2026. So DXC Technology announced Amber, the next gen automotive software platform. It's at a high level. Amber is positioned as modular software-defined vehicle platform designed to help automakers manage vehicle software, data, and lifecycle updates more like an enterprise platform than a traditional embedded system. So this isn't about dashboards or infotainment. It's about treating vehicles as long-lived digital products that evolve continuously through software. Automotive is really becoming an enterprise IT problem, is what this article was saying. Car makers are now dealing with OTA updates, data platforms, AI driven features, regulatory and safety constraints, long product life cycles with fast software change, which kind of looks like a lot. At least this article said it looks like a lot like ERP just on wheels. So the takeaway here was this is a bigger example of enterprise tech bleeding into product companies. So this article said that we're watching ERP principles move into manufacturing and automotive platform and interoperability thinking replacing single driving system designs. And lastly, that services firms reposition themselves as platform enablers, not just implementers. Last thing is it also reinforces a broader trend. The most complex digital transformations are no longer happening inside back office systems. They're happening inside products themselves. So Eric, I kind of wanted to get your take on this, if you heard about it, different things like that. And then one main question I have is the auto industry heading towards the same vendor lock-in problems potentially that ERP is facing?
Yeah, that's interesting. I had not heard of this acquisition either until you brought it up, so I was not aware. And it's interesting to hear what DXC is doing, especially in the context of what you just described with Accenture buying the AI technology firm. In this case, instead of buying a software, it sounds like they're buying a product. That makes me wonder, first of all, are they going to continue to support the technology type stuff they did? Because I think DXC, if I remember correctly, and the audience can correct me if I'm wrong, I think DXC is a big Microsoft shop, if I remember correctly. They deploy a lot of Microsoft products, I believe. And makes me wonder, will they continue to do that and try and integrate the technologies they support with this particular product within the automotive industry? Or are they truly trying to become more of a product industry? But I think it both these examples, both what you talked about with Accenture and what you're saying with DXC, shows how these services companies are under a lot of pressure right now, because not only is technology changing for the services they provide, but also the services themselves may not be sustainable. And so it makes me think maybe there's a broader trend that they think is going to happen longer term, where they won't be able to keep that massive size and scale that they've had, because DXC is a big company. They're not as big as Accenture, but they are a larger system integrator and technology consultancy. So it makes me wonder if they think, we can't maintain this size and scale that we've built in the past because of AI and technological changes. So now we need to become more of a product company. I don't know the answers to that, but I would suspect that that's what's happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. And another question with this is, who really owns vehicle data when platforms like this sit in the middle, if you know that?
Yeah, it's a big question for not just a product like this, but certainly with AI, as we talked about a moment ago, even with your core ERP system in the cloud. If you've got cloud or SaaS solutions and you're paying for accessing your own data or paying to transact your own data, even if technically or contractually it says that you own it, but you have to pay for it, it makes you wonder, do I really own it? And if the vendor has the ability to cut off your access to it if you don't pay a bill, or you decide you don't want that platform anymore and you're going to stop paying, that makes me wonder, do you realistically have ownership of it? You may contractually, but do you really have access to it if you can't access it without paying a exorbitant fee potentially to get it? So I think it gets back to what you were saying a moment ago about vendor lock. I think vendors want vendor lock. It's good for them. It's good for predictability. It's predictable recurring revenue. Makes switching costs a lot higher for customers, so that it's more predictable revenue with less competition or less potential disruption to that revenue. So I see why vendors want to do it, but I think it's extremely harmful, or can be extremely harmful to customers. And I don't think we've really seen the crux of that battle happen yet. I think in the next few years, we will see a backlash and a fight with vendors to regain some of that control that they're losing right now in these vendor lock scenarios.
For sure. And last question before we get into the conversation today, what lessons should CIOs in traditional industries take from this shift that we're seeing in the automotive industry?
Well, I think it just goes to show that even something like automotive, where you think of it as, in many cases, an old school manufacturing blue collar industry that's been around for over 100 years, even they're going through massive disruption and change. So I think that's the big takeaway for me, is it doesn't matter what industry or what niche you might be in within the global economy. Innovation and change is happening fast. It's happening faster than you're probably comfortable with. And most organizations are going to struggle to keep up just because the technology is changing so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm super excited to get into the conversation today because I know there was another big change. Like we said in these articles today, there were some changes that came out, but there's another change that I'm excited to hear about.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple of weeks ago, a software vendor called Epicor, which focuses on mid-market manufacturing, distribution, retail, primarily manufacturing, distribution, retail types of companies. They've historically offered hybrid deployment options, or they've given customers options, to deploy on-prem versus cloud. And they're not taking away that optionality, but they are clearly moving in the direction of making it more appealing to be in the cloud in terms of investing more innovation in the cloud and limiting the amount of support that they provide for on-premise. So while they haven't gone so far as, say, SAP and Oracle in Microsoft and completely discontinuing support on the horizon, they're moving in that direction. They're taking a step in that direction. So the reason I want to have the conversation here in this next segment is to talk about how it's not just the big tier one ERP vendors that are doing it. Most, if not all, software providers are moving in some way to the cloud, and it's good for them. It's good for their recurring revenue. But the question is it good for customers, and how will customers react? So because this announcement just came out recently, we're going to have Kerrie Jordan on the show, who's a vice president at Epicor. And then we'll also have Jose Gomez on the show, who is he's the head of IT for one of Epicor's largest customers, but he's also the head of an Epicor user group in North America. And so he's going to speak about this more from the customer perspective. And we're obviously going to talk to and hopefully hear from some customers of Epicor as we go through this conversation. So we're going to have that conversation here in just a moment. And then later in the show, we'll shift gears and talk about SAP and whether or not SAP will retain its dominant position as the number one ERP vendor in terms of market share, especially for larger organizations. So we've got a lot more to cover here in the next couple segments. Be sure to stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
When the soul of the city was laid to rest and the nights forgotten.
If you're about to embark on the jungle of digital transformation, check out my new book, Welcome to the Jungle. It's a book that just came out in late 2025. It's my second book, and it's a book that focuses on digital transformation failure case studies and talks about the lessons and takeaways from that. It's 300 pages packed of all the lessons and things that I've learned from having been an expert witness in lawsuits related to digital transformations, and also with our team helping clients recover some of their failed projects. I've included as many lessons that I could possibly fit into one book here. You can read this book. You can order it anywhere in the world in hard copy format, which is this format here. You can get it in paperback. You can also get it electronically as well. Scan the QR code right here or go to the links below for your copy. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 257. This is the tech agnostic podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including people, process, technology, and strategy. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent tech agnostic consulting provider that can help you and your team through your digital transformation, whether you're in the planning stage, whether you're ramping up a project, whether you're trying to recover a failed project. We're tech agnostic and can help you from an objective perspective and client side perspective, make sure that you're successful in your initiative. So feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to learn more about how we can help. And I'm excited for our next segment here, our next guest. We have a first-time guest joining us and a repeat guest joining us here today. The first-time guest is Jose Gomez, who is an IT application leader within a company called Stephen Mould, and Stephen Mould, I should say. And he's also the head of an Epicor user group in North America. And we're also going to have Kerrie Jordan on the show, who's been on this podcast before, but we're going to have her on the show to talk about Epicor's recent announcement about cloud offerings and on-prem offerings. And we're going to talk about what this means to the broader middle market of ERP software providers. So with all this being said, Jose and Kerrie, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with you, Kerrie. Tell me a little bit, first of all, just about you, what you do at Epicor, and then I'll come back to you and ask you more about this announcement that you guys made.
Absolutely. Happy to. Hi, everyone. It's great to have this chance to chat with you. I'm Kerrie Jordan. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and SVP of Product at Epicor. I've been with Epicor now for 8 years. And my career has really spanned product management, product marketing, and now I have responsibility for all of marketing and much of our product portfolio. I've been a part of Epicor as we've been going through our SaaS transformation, and am so happy to have this opportunity to really, take the time to talk with you all, to listen to your questions, to have a conversation in regards to the most recent announcement that we've made.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here, Kerrie. Not your first time here on the podcast, so thank you for being back again, as always. And then, Jose, tell us about yourself, what you do, and also the company and the user group you're part of.
Sure, Eric. Thanks for having us. I'm Jose Gomez. I'm the IT Director for Infrastructure and Architecture at Stephen Gould. We are a global manufacturing and packaging company, logistics. We have 42 plants in the United States and 8 companies worldwide. And aside of my 9-to-5, I'm also a co-founder of EpiUsers.help, which is a user-run peer-to-peer support forum focused mostly on Epicor products like Kinetic, B21, and things like that. It's a 10,000 member community that is active and thriving, and we love interacting and with each other and learning from each other.
Absolutely. So you bring a unique perspective here, not only as an Epicor customer, but also as someone who's gotten a lot of feedback through the user group, and you engage with a lot of different Epicor community members as well. So I'm excited to get your perspective on this as well.
Absolutely.
So to start, Kerrie, tell us a little bit about the announcement that you all made last week. I posted it on LinkedIn. I think I dropped it in the chat for this discussion, and if not, I'll drop it in the comments again as we're talking here. But just tell us about the announcement itself and sort of where the evolution of it, what it means, all that stuff.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so I'm glad that you posted the details, because there are some details to it that might impact customers differently. But Overall, what Epicor has announced is a shift in our product strategy to focus our investments and innovation in the Epicor Cloud solutions. We announced it for Epicor Kinetic, Epicor Profit 21, and Epicor BizTrack. And what that means is over the next few years, there will be a shift. There's a schedule of releases where Epicor is going to be investing in sending out the feature releases in the cloud now. So, this is really emphasizing our cloud commitment, and our final on-premises releases for Kinetic, Profit 21, and BizTrack will be in 2028. There will be an active support period for our customers, and after that, there is a sustaining support period that kicks in. For Kinetic, that's January 1st, 2030. And then for Profit 21 and BizTrack, that's in 2029, mid-2029. So it's an important announcement that we've made. It's part of, I would say, a broader industry trend. But happy to get into the reasons why Epicor has announced this. But we're really excited, and we think that the future is absolutely bright, and there's a lot to come for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super helpful. And I'm going to ask you more about the why here in just a second.
Yeah.
The why behind it, and sort of the business why behind it, because I know there's a lot of really good reasons why you and other vendors are pursuing this strategy. But first, I want to get to the audience here. A lot of people commenting where they're from today, so I'll just flash some of them on the screen. But we've got people from Minnesota, Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida, people or someone from Switzerland, Mason City, Iowa, Pune, India, Melbourne, Australia, etc. So we've got people all over the world watching here today. So this is obviously a very interesting, hot topic for a lot of us here today. And I appreciate you guys really both being part of this this discussion, because I think it is such an important conversation. And I'll be honest, Kerrie, I've been, as an independent tech agnostic firm that is not affiliated with Epicor or anyone else, I've been fairly critical of vendors that do these migrations to the cloud, not because cloud is bad, but when it limits customer choice. That's been a big part of where I've always said, hey, customers should have choice, that sort of thing. But I also understand that there is a very good business reason that makes a lot of sense. And I've heard you and others talk about it in the industry, but I'd love to hear you maybe explain to the audience or talk about it from the business perspective. As a software vendor, you've got to do what you got to do to keep the lights on, and obviously be smart about how you invest R&D dollars, all that stuff. But tell us the why behind this. Why is Epicor doing this?
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so this is all about rapid innovation. Over the past few years, even just like the past 2-3 years, enterprise software has moved so quickly, especially with the advent of AI. And in order for Epicor to deliver on our responsibility for partnership with our customers and keeping them ahead of the market, we also need to make sure that we keep ourselves ahead of the market. If you look out the number of ERP competitors, even just within the past couple years, there have been new entrants into the market. Some of them are AI driven, but all of them are SaaS driven, right? There hasn't been a new on-premises ERP vendor that's come into the market. And so to ensure that we continue to deliver on the expectations that our customers have to responsibly deliver pragmatic innovation, as well as cybersecurity, really ensuring business resilience, that's what's really driving our shift to the cloud.
Right. And it's also, you guys have acquired and developed different ERP solutions over time. And, I've got to think that gets pretty expensive, and you start spreading resources pretty thin when, if you've got multiple products, multiple platforms, some on-prem, some in the cloud. Is that part of it too, just the way you consolidate the R&D? Is that how you're getting to that level of innovation that you're talking about?
This is a good question. And I do want to say we've actually doubled the amount of investment in R&D over the past 2-3 years. So we're excited about all the innovations that we're bringing to market, and we have made these investments in order to be able to innovate on those acquisitions, ensure that they're integrated to our ERPs, and to be ready for a stable, secure, scalable solution in the cloud for our customers. So we've absolutely been investing. We've been increasing the amount of R&D investment so that our customers can have a really strong, great customer experience with our SaaS solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to think if you are doubling R&D like that and you continue at that level of spend, consolidating it into less platforms over time, I imagine that's just going to drive further innovation and hopefully in a way that still satisfies a broad swath of the market that you guys target.
You got it. And at the pace that's needed for the market today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So Jose, we've already gotten a couple comments from people, just sort of knee-jerk reactions here on what they think about this announcement or just this general trend. And again, this isn't just an Epicor thing. This is a broader trend in the middle market and in the broader ERP space. But Jose, you've been on the front lines, not only as one of the biggest Epicor customers, but also as the leader of that EpiUsers group. Tell us about what has the knee-jerk reaction been, or what have some of the themes been in the feedback you've received so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, the reaction has been varied, right? There are some people that are vehemently opposed to it. There are some people that are in the middle somewhere, and there are some people that are all for it. I think the great majority of people do not want to stifle or stop innovation. I think that there's basically 4 individual areas of concern that kind of have been summarized in all the threads that we've seen, right? The first one being control, right? The customers, in some aspects, right, feel like they're losing control of their data. They're losing control of the ability to quickly react and change and pivot when the data is now somewhere else where we don't have direct access or ownership for the data, right? The second piece is compliance, right? A lot of us are in ITAR, CCMC compliance type of organizations that require specific rules that may or may not be met by a SaaS offering, obviously. And then you have the cost question, right? You're moving from capital expenditure to operational expenditure. That shifts a lot of that financial burden. It puts you in a subscription model for the core of your enterprise, right? If Word goes down, if I can't, pay for my, CRM, it is not that big a deal. But the ERP is the core of our organizations, right? It holds your financials, it holds your GL, it holds everything that you need. So moving that from CapEx to OpEx is a definite concern for a lot of our customers. And then last is the quality, and quality as it relates to access, right? What happens when the internet goes down? What happens when I don't have access to my ERP? And again, Epicor, being a mid-market manufacturing focused ERP for the longest time, right? They have a 50+ year history of small manufacturing companies that have things like old hardware that communicates directly with the ERP nowadays, that is not easily updatable or changeable. And so, ERP is a generational type of investment, right? The company usually buys ERP and is on it for 10 to 20 years. And so a shift like this can have a significant impact on the organization and the ability for them to pivot and quickly move.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, here's a comment from YouTube. Control, cost, compliance, quality, all concerns. And then another comment here from YouTube from Chris Kahn on YouTube says innovation would have be a novel cloud first approach, not a web port over the same product we've already had, including the same problems we've been griping about for years. So I guess this question is for you, Kerrie. Is this mean that you're taking the existing on-premise functionality, for better or for worse, and putting that in the cloud, or how is that evolution of functionality from on-prem to cloud happening?
Yes. Okay. These are good questions. I do want to, so when it comes to the on-premises to cloud experience for customers, Epicor has rewritten tens of thousands of lines of code for Kinetic specifically. We'll talk Kinetic specifically, to build it as a cloud native solution. And then we're also already enhancing and building out additional features for cloud that, customers running in the cloud. We have over 20,000 that are running cloud solutions with Epicor Cloud are taking advantage of today. So for those who have gone through that migration, I know there's a concern around control, right? And the ability to interact with your system and administrate your system. Epicor has recently announced and released our cloud management portal that allows organizations to retain control of their system from an administrative perspective, where you can, go in and do self-service upgrades and updates. You can do database refreshes, you can restart task agents. And these are the kinds of activities that I know that on-premises customers have been requesting for years, to be able to have that ability within the cloud versus having to submit it, through a support request. So we have been, really building out similar experiences that customers had on premises, and they can now manage that and do that within the cloud as well. I do want to really specify as well that unlike other competitors or vendors that have been issuing similar kinds of announcements where they're shifting to the cloud, Epicor continues to support on-premises customers. There's no immediate action required. I know that the title of this is sunsetting, and there's a lot of talk about end of life and all of that, but certainly this is not a sunset or an end of life. It's really over the period of time, encouraging our customers to move to cloud, but realistically, companies can stay on sustain however long they want. We have thousands of customers that run on sustaining support today. And so this is something that, when customers are ready to move to cloud, we'll be there for them. If they want to stay on premises, there's sustaining support for them, which kicks in 4 years for Kinetic and 3.5 for Profit 21 and BizTrack. So, there is certainly a path, and there's time, and, there are many resources that are available and ready to support those customers when they're ready to move.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some of your other thoughts around what Jose was mentioning, some of those themes that he was hearing around cost,
yes,
quality control?
Those were great. Okay, so I'm glad, Jose, that you brought those up. I did want to talk about that. So there's the control aspect, which the cloud management portal really helps with. I also want to specify that when companies move from on-premises to the cloud, they maintain ownership of their data. And I think that there's a misperception that Epicor owns the data. That is not true. Customer always owns their data. And there are ways to get at the data that we have been innovating and developing over the past few years that are available to cloud customers so that they can access it in ways that they're familiar with, like run queries and to be able to do reports and things. So there is the ability to gain access to the data in the cloud as well that are similar experiences and familiar from when on premises. There's the specific around aerospace and defense and certifications and international data sovereignty concerns. And I do want to encourage any customers who are on now. We've been working one-on-one with many customers that have data sovereignty, government regulation requirements, industry regulation requirements, and working with them on a go-forward plan to ensure business continuity. So if you have that in your business and you haven't yet spoken to your customer account manager, I encourage you to do so. You can also reach out to, there's two different ways, info@epicor.com. That was in the press release and the customer email that we sent out. You can go on Epicor, that's our customer support portal, and you can email me. It's kerrie.jordan@epicor.com. Please do. This is important to us because this is the most consequential, we know this is the most consequential announcement that we've made to our customers over the past many years. And there are a lot of questions out there. There's a lot of concern, and who we are, it's critical to our identity to partner with our customers and to be there for them. So you can message me on LinkedIn, you can email me, please do if you have these regulations within your business, the industry data sovereignty requirements that I mentioned. Jose, what were the other ones that you had mentioned?
It was, cost and then quality.
Cost and quality. Okay, great. So when it comes to cost, so the total cost of ownership for running SaaS might be different from running on premises. And it's difficult to speak to it because it really depends on your business, the investments that you've made in infrastructure. There's also a number of ways that customers have been running our solutions when they've purchased the perpetual licenses. Many are running in private data centers. Many have their own subscriptions in public data centers. And some are running it within their premises, right? So it's difficult to speak to cost of ownership specifically, but I do encourage you to work with your customer account managers. Many customer account managers, and if anybody listening in has made that move to cloud, please do share your experiences. But it really depends on your specific situation and what you've invested in and what you plan to, and if you think about investing over time, really it's you have to take into account expenses, and then also business resilience and the risk of remaining on premises. I will say, and many customers have spoken publicly about this. We have customer success stories on the Epicor.com website where they were running systems on premises and there was a security incident. And Epicor then, they reached out to Epicor to help, and we helped them get to the cloud, protect their data, and now there's ongoing backups and things for them. So again, there are customer success stories, case studies and things on our website that I encourage you to read. Customers have spoken openly about this, how we've helped customers lock down credentials, create backups and things, so that when, if anything like that were to happen, Epicor is there to support them. We are, monitoring our cloud solutions 24/7. We have resources around the world. We're partnered with Microsoft and AWS, and we take advantage of their security expertise and breadth of resources, monetary as well as people, and all of the AI, fraud detection and all of those things. So that's helping us to maintain stability, security, and scalability of our systems. When it comes to quality, this is something else I think would be great to hear from customers as well. So when it comes to our ability to focus resources on our cloud solutions, this does help us improve quality over time. And I'll say, speaking of R&D investments, much of that doubling of our R&D investment has gone to cloud, and that has gone to quality within cloud. So we have Test Recoder is a tool, for example, that we've delivered to customers that allows them to also run, tests and things within their system to ensure high quality in the cloud. So there's a variety of different ways that we've been investing in automating quality for cloud. Now, I will say, of course, it's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. We have posted our SLAs for cloud solutions. And if at any time there's a question in regards to availability of cloud, we have status.epicor.com that customers can go to. It's open to everybody. And that allows customers to, see the availability over time of the cloud solutions. So yeah. I hope that helped, but we could definitely dig into any more of those.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I appreciate that. And you bring up some really good points. Simon on YouTube sort of chimes in and adds to some of what you were saying a moment ago, Kerrie, in that the balance of investment is important. There's no point in spending heaps on R&D if support can't keep up. And I think, that gets back to the point of sort of consolidating, the R&D, the support, all that stuff longer term, even though you are providing support long term for these on-prem solutions. I imagine more dollars will go into supporting the cloud solutions over time as more customers adapt to it. There is a question here. Actually, there's a couple threads that are coming up here that I'd love to get both of your perspectives on. One is around data control. I'm going to find the one that I thought was representative of the thread here, because there's a few here. And there's some comments in the chat around access to data and control and ownership of data. And some are commenting on, should we have to pay to access our data? If we do have to pay to access data, do we really own it? So the question here that I think maybe sets the context is, do we have to pay extra to access our data if we own it?
Yeah, this is a good question. The ways to access data differs across Epicor products, and you always have access to your data. It depends on what you want to do with the data. If there's a high velocity or high capacity way in which you're looking to leverage it, that has compute required that might necessitate investment, just the way that the processing works. So it's difficult to kind of talk through it without having specifics. But I do encourage you, if you are looking at the cloud, please do ask your customer account manager specific to your solution, your ERP, and what you want to do with the data. If you want to plug it into third-party reporting tools, for example, that require fast and higher compute capacity that might then require additional investment in other solutions and tools to do it. But that's not the case in every scenario. So again, it kind of depends.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for that. And I think, the good thing about this conversation, and especially the chat that we're getting in across the different platforms here, is it's interesting to hear people's knee-jerk reactions around some of this. And I think bridging the gap between, product roadmap and what customer needs are is really important. So Jose, I've got a question for you then. Based on what you're hearing so far from the Epicor user community, and I know you probably don't have an exact number here, but if you just had order of magnitude gut feel in mind, what percentage or what percentage roughly do you think of Epicor customers are going to use this as an opportunity to transition to the cloud in the short term, of the ones that are still on-prem? Do you see people saying like, hey, you know what, we've been sitting on the fence for a while, now's the time for us to jump in and just do it? Or is the dust still settling on the announcement and you're not sure? Or like, how would you?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is the dust still settling on the announcement. Everybody's still reacting to it. I don't have a feel for what percentage is going to follow through and move to the cloud, or what percentage might do something different. As I mentioned before, ERP is like a generational type of investment in an organization, right? You buy ERP, you implement ERP, you expect to be in that ERP for 10, 20 years, right? It is an incredibly expensive investment to do as an organization, and it is incredibly expensive to migrate off of the ERP, right? Into a different platform. So I think in the grand scheme of things, the majority of customers will get to the point where they, adapt to whatever offerings Epicor has. I think in the short term, there's going to be significant pain, right? Speaking from our own experience, right? We have invested millions of dollars in not only infrastructure, but customizations and things like that with this announcement, eventually we will have to reinvest in some way to get there, right? And going back to the control question, that's a big point there as well, right? I can quickly pivot. And one of the differentiators for Epicor has always been the flexibility of being able to customize it, being able to change it and adapt it to run your business, right? Once you move that control away from the individual business and into a SaaS offering, that limits your ability to do those things, right? And so, while I do agree, yes, I can get the data, and I'm sure the contract says the data is mine, right? But regardless, the server is somewhere else, in somebody else's computer, as they say, and what happens if there's a financial downturn and I have to, as a business leader, I have to start pressing some levers to kind of save myself. And now the ERP, which is the core blood of my organization, is essentially held away from me in a way that I have no levers, right? I can't call Epicor and say, hey, I can't pay my bill this month, right? And those are the kind of concerns, I think, from a data control where it comes to, like, as an on-premise customer today, if something terrible happens to the economy and I have to press levers and I have to try and rescue myself as an organization, I have control of my data. And by that, I mean, I have control of my destiny in my ERP, right? Mm-hmm. If I choose to, for whatever reason, to slow down and not move to the next version quickly because I can't afford the investment right now, that's something I can do. In a cloud offering, normally you are required to stay current, right? It takes us as a customer about 3 to 4 months to cleanly upgrade from version to version of the ERP, because we have a huge amount invested in customizations and process improvements that we have to do end-to-end testing on, right? These are things that we lose a little bit of control on when we go into that side, right? It's not just OPEX or CAPEX to OPEX. It is the fact that now the ERP is in the hands of someone else. And yes, I trust Epicor. They're our partner. We're in this together. But in the end, they're a business. We're a business. And so that relationship, takes a new power dynamic with this change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's interesting. Here's, I think this is one of the common themes we're seeing in the chat right now is what you just said, Jose. If my business struggles, or if I can't pay my SaaS or cloud bill, you get shut off, you get cut off from accessing your data and applications. That's a concern here. And so, this person says, what happens if they up the maintenance 10% every year and a customer can't afford it? I know Microsoft recently took a lot of heat for doing something along those lines. They increased like 10 to 15% year over year for some D365 users. And so I think there's a fear based on what some other vendors have done so far in the cloud journey that is an ongoing concern. What are your thoughts, Kerrie? I know you can't predict the future, and you probably, I don't imagine you guys have thought that far ahead, in terms of longer term strategy for pricing and that sort of thing. But what would you say to this?
Yeah, maybe what I can do is to help clarify when cloud customers sign their SaaS contracts, they lock in the price for the next however many years, like the term of their contract. So you wouldn't have to worry about a surprise increase when it comes to this question here regarding maintenance increase every year. There is not a maintenance increase. You work out your price within the cloud contract for that term. So maybe that helps in terms of predictability. Speaking of, as the world changes, as the market changes, economy changes, inflation, all of that, you would have predictability in your business in terms of how much you're paying for your SaaS contract. So maybe that helps a bit there. And in regards to the upgrades, they are included with your SaaS contract. You don't pay extra to do the upgrade. It's a part of the experience. And there are tools within the system to help you. If you've got configurations within your system, we have our configuration upgrade dashboard within Kinetic, for example, that shows, it highlights for you visually, like if your configuration is green, you're good. If it's yellow, maybe there's a cosmetic thing you need to go in and change in regards to how the fields are appearing within your screens. And then if it's red, something's broken and you need to go fix it. And we have tools available to help with fixing, especially as, we've launched Prism. There are AI specific tools to help you rebuild configurations, or even if you're going through that upgrade from on-premises to cloud, there are tools available to help you code or rebuild, leveraging AI customizations that maybe you've built and rely on within your business for years in the cloud. And as part of any implementation, right, there are resources available to help you to determine whether or not those configurations or customizations that you've built over the years are even applicable to your business anymore. So that's something that we can do, and we're helping you plan your move. But when it comes to the actual upgrade experience, when you're already in the cloud, it's very, very rapid, very, very simple. And there are tools available to help. If you do want help, there are professional services, consulting services, and then the wide variety of partners around the world that are helping customers every day, if they're looking for that kind of support within their business. But as far as needing that kind of support, especially if you have the expertise to run the system on premises already on staff, managing it in the cloud becomes, I don't really see this to be a heavy uplift in any way for those that have the talent, and the resources on staff running on premises and now in the cloud. In fact, I would say, the role becomes much more of helping your business navigate the future of technology, leveraging the new enhancements, the new features that come out. And then we do also have, of course, a lot of resources available within the library, our Epicor library, our Epicor learning system. We've got the Prism experiences that are available actually for every cloud customer to use Prism, where it's kind of like a Google experience, right? Where you can go in and ask questions, and the AI generates a response for you, and then it links you to the sources and site sources. So that's also available to anybody who's looking to learn very quickly within your cloud solutions. So there's a variety of tools available, and a lot of customers that have gone through this move have shared, through lots of different means, their experiences and what it's like once you're in the cloud, what life is like, what your Epicor experience is like. And I will suggest that if anybody is interested in this, Jose, you should talk about the community. But I also wanted to mention Insights. Insights is a great time to come together as the broader Epicor community to learn about all the systems, the different ways in what that experience is like when you do that upgrade, all the learning tools that are available. And if you are interested and you have not registered yet, it's epicor.com/insights is how you'd sign up.
Right. Okay. That's super helpful. I appreciate that. We're here having a conversation around the future of ERP software in the middle market, particularly as it relates to on-prem versus cloud. We've got a lot more to cover in this conversation. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm Greg Benton. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with Third Stage Consulting. And if you are embarking on your digital transformation journey or in the middle of that journey in 2026, you're going to want to see our digital transformation report. This latest edition really dives into a lot of the key trends that we're seeing in the marketplace and the ecosystem right now. It also highlights a number of the things that are happening with AI being an important component and integral part of the ERP systems that are leading the way right now. Also, the shift toward composable and best-of-breed cloud solutions is really accelerating the decline of monolithic ERP replacement. The opportunity to download the report is found at thirdstage-consulting.com. And you'll also find other tools that will help you in the initiatives and the business planning that you're doing for 2026. Don't leave phase zero without it. Reach out today.
I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 257. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, and it is produced by Major Tom Productions. So if you'd like to learn how Third Stage can help make your digital transformation more successful and help you avoid failure, please feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. And if you'd like to learn more about how to collaborate with us on some of the content we create, including this podcast, be sure to reach out to Major Tom Productions. I've included contact information below for that as well. So we're here with Jose and Kerrie talking about Epicor's recent announcement around the cloud and on-prem solutions for the middle market and what it means to the broader mid-market ERP space, particularly with on-prem and cloud. This is from YouTube. The comment is, Epicor upgrades are easy. It's the uplift that remains your duty regardless of on-prem or SaaS. What are your thoughts on this, Jose? Do you agree with this? Because I think, it is easy to get caught up in the technology. Obviously, these are all valid points. Control, quality, cost, all the things we're talking about is very valid. But there's also the flip side of this, which is, I don't want to say it doesn't matter whether it's cloud or on-prem, but regardless of what solution you move to or just making any sort of change, it's usually not the technology that's going to hang up these sorts of projects or disrupt these sorts of projects. It's typically the user adoption, the way you align your processes with the technology and vice versa, all that stuff. So what are your thoughts? Do you agree with this comment that
absolutely
adoption itself?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, the upgrade in the cloud takes a couple of hours from a system perspective, right? But then it takes, in our case, 3 months of work, right? And that's because we have custom processes built on top of the flexible ERP, right, that we love. And it takes a long time for us to test everything out, make sure everything works, right? Because, Epicor does their best, obviously, when they're releasing new versions, but things break, things change. There are breaking changes. There's a lot of things on top of the ERP, right? Because the ERP is not only just the core of your business, but it is also, thankfully, a platform that allows you to change the ERP to fit your business as much as you need, right? And so a lot of the hang up, I think, with for example, the upgrades in the cloud is that the control goes away from you on when you trigger that to now being basically, for lack of a better word, forced to upgrade on the cadence of what Epicor determines. And I know there's some flexibility with flex plans and things like that, Kerrie. But in the end, you are required to be in the most current version of Epicor at a cutoff date, right? And for, depending on the size, like small mom and pop shops that are pretty vanilla, that is pie in the sky, right? You click a button, the upgrade happens, you move forward, everything is great, right? But like I said before, the not small community of customers that have invested a ton of work and a ton of money into using the ERP as a platform, that puts the onus now on us to make sure that we have those tests and that upgrade cadence in a way that doesn't disrupt our business, right? I can tell you right now that if I were on the cloud today and there was an upgrade, drop dead date of a month from now, there would not be enough time for us to be able to test and migrate everything over to the next version, right? And I'm sure there will be flexibility, and I know Epicor, Kerrie being here is a great example, is they're listening, right? And we'll figure this out, but it is a big concern of the community, right? I have invested, there are folks that have invested millions of dollars on infrastructure, communications between your machines and the ERP, those type of things that cannot be on the drop of a dime changed or moved to a new version. That's where I think the biggest piece of this comes into play, right? Yes, the cloud, the base software will be automatically uplifted in an hour's work, and most of the time that piece is pretty flawless, right? It is the work on top of that becomes a problem for some customers. And again, small, mom and pop shop style, this is like kind of the sweet spot, right? It's that mid to higher market company that has used the ERP as a platform that is going to have a harder time with this change.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great point. And here's a question I think either both of you might be able to help answer here. This is from YouTube as well. Comment is, fast innovation suits small businesses, but large enterprises prioritize stability and traditional methods. Does Epicor limit itself to small and mid-sized companies only? I'm not as concerned about that last question. Last part of that question, Kerrie, can I answer it for you that no, Epicor does not just do small and mid-sized companies?
Yeah. Actually, maybe this is a good opportunity to mention, we do have an enterprise cloud option available to customers. So I think everything that we've been talking about here is in regards to our public cloud. You would see Epicor in the public cloud. That means Epicor Kinetic, Profit 21, and BizTrack running in Azure, because we're partnered with Microsoft Azure. We do have an enterprise cloud offering that supports large businesses. That said, we have many, large businesses running in the public cloud as well. But to this specific question, if you require stability, you can upgrade as often as you want, every 6 months that we're issuing out the major upgrades, or you can actually retain your existing version for up to 18 months without penalty, for example. So there are options available, and if anybody's interested from a large organization and wants to take a look at the enterprise cloud offering, we have many companies that are running in the enterprise cloud today, and that could be a great option for your business.
So, Jose, from your perspective, then, being a larger customer of Epicor's, how do you view this innovation versus stability thing? Like from an enterprise apps perspective, and not necessarily getting into on-prem versus cloud, but just more technology is changing fast. You always have the opportunity to have something better than you've got. Probably for most of us, most organizations have functionality they're not taking full advantage of because the technology companies, I think, do a really good job of staying way ahead of where customer innovation might be on their own. So how do you view innovation versus stability? What do you value as a user?
I think we value both, right? Stability is the most important, right? At least in my opinion, in our business, right? We want things to work smoothly, to work well, right? But we also don't want to fall behind. We want to be at the leading edge of technology as well, because it makes us more nimble, it makes us change faster, it reduces our costs. Hopefully, it increases our revenue, all those things that come with better technology, right? But stability is the most important because we need to get the work done, right? It doesn't do me any good to have an AI chat agent that I can talk to and do some things if I can't run a simple report, right? That because I haven't been able to figure out what my customization to that report did in the latest version of the software, whatever software that might be, right? So that's the balance where yes, we need to be at the leading edge of technology as an organization, and we want our ERP to be at the bleeding edge of technology as well, because I do want to eventually get to the point where I can use something like Prism to accelerate our day-to-day, right? But it needs to be stable, it needs to be solid, it needs to have quality. I need to be able to run those reports and send out the bills, because that's what pays for the lights to stay on, right? So I think that's the balance there is, yes, it needs to be absolutely stable. I need to be able to count on it being there always, while having the option to, as we're ready, an organization move forward in a technology sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Great point. Kerrie, there's a question. I'm struggling to find it in here, so I'll paraphrase it. But it was a question around a potential burst of activity among Epicor customers moving to the cloud as a result of this announcement. And
Mm-hmm.
the question was around, is Epicor's ecosystem prepared, and do they have the capacity to handle any potential burst in people that say, okay, we've been sitting on the fence for a while now with this whole on-prem versus cloud thing. This is a good, nudge for us to go ahead and make the move now. And suddenly you've got this burst of the Epicor implementations all happening at once. What are your thoughts around that?
Sure. That's a good question. And I imagine that, there's concern around that. We've been investing in our teams, in our tooling and our technology in order to be able to support this change. This is not something that we just spontaneously decided. This is certainly something that's been a part of a long-term strategy that we've been investing in order to be ready for our customers when they are ready to make the move. We anticipate that this will happen over time. We don't expect that there will be a lot of, all at once. If that were to happen, we have the tools, we have the teams, we're ready to go. In the press release, we mentioned Ascend with Epicor. Now, Ascend with Epicor is a proven methodology for customers that are looking to make that move. It also leverages AI tools to help accelerate data transformation and data conversion. So we're ready. We're ready to go. Not just Epicor, but our partners around the world.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So some other comments. I'll just read through a few of the comments here, because I think this is just valuable feedback for all of us in the community. Simon on LinkedIn says the speed of ERP adoption is bottlenecked by the customer, not the vendor. I actually tend to agree with that. I think, it's usually, whether it's Epicor or other vendors in the market, they usually are going to innovate and change a lot faster than most organizations can. And that's not an indictment on customers. Obviously, it's just the reality of, you've got a business, there's some stability you are looking for, to your point, Jose. Yep. And so, you're trying to find the right balance between stability, predictability, and innovation. Whereas I would say technical vendors are probably a little more focused on innovation, which is what you want them for. That's why you're paying for their software. So I think that's interesting comment. A couple other comments that I think are more good for the Kerrie, you and your team. And again, these aren't questions; it's more comments or feedback from the community here. This is from Brian on YouTube. It says, I can see an argument for cloud if your company lacks the internal skill set. A lot of us, however, already have that skill set. And it goes on to continue there. But I think that's I think a concern too for IT departments and IT staff would be, am I going to lose control? Am I going to lose value within the organization? So I think this becomes a pretty big change management issue too internally. And I don't know, Jose, have you seen that, or do you anticipate your team internally might struggle with some of that too for that reason?
I think we'll struggle with some of the control issues, but I think more importantly, though, one of the premises of a SaaS offering is that you relinquish control, but you get the benefit of infrastructure savings, right? Because it's a shared infrastructure now. It is on the cloud. I'm not paying for hardware. The problem is that most companies don't run just an ERP system, right? We run a bunch of pieces of software. So in the end, the infrastructure costs for me switching to SaaS do not reduce that much, right? I still need to have the staff to run my network. I still need to have the staff to run my servers. I still need to have all that infrastructure in place, because the ERP is a small part of all the pieces of software that are needed to run a global organization, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. It is a struggle, because I can't easily justify it and say, oh, no, don't worry, we're going to SaaS, and now I no longer have to have a staff of 15. and all these servers and all those type of things, right? I may save one server, I may save one license, but in the end, there's a lot more out there than just ERP. So it doesn't realize that gain as much as it could. And yes, absolutely. If I have the skill set in-house, now I'm shifting that cost over to SaaS so that I have to pay for that, but I still have to keep my employees so that they can help me run everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Good points. And then this is from Simon on LinkedIn. Simon says, small customers will not even notice the issues. Large customers can afford it. The mid-market is where it will hurt the most. And I think that's an interesting comment. I had never thought of it from that perspective, but it is kind of interesting thinking about the mid-market and how, if you're larger, maybe you have more resources, more budget, whatever. If you're smaller, maybe you can change faster and just roll with the punches a little faster. But the mid-market, you're sort of caught in the middle. And then Gabriel on LinkedIn says, I agree with Simon that midsize will get the most impact from faster upgrade cadence. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? Do you think that, every 6 months, I think you said, Kerrie, there'd be new releases, but you have 18 months to decide when you want to adopt or put that into production?
Yeah, so for public cloud customers running in Epicor Public Cloud, Kinetic, Prophet 21, BizTrack, we have major releases that come out every 6 months. And when I mentioned the 18 months, we have the enterprise cloud offering for those large organizations that require longer, that they need to stay on an existing upgrade for longer. They have up to 18 months in that enterprise cloud offering. I will also mention for life sciences customers specifically that require validation of their system because of FDA regulations, there's also a specific upgrade cadence available to them that allows them to stay on longer. So all of this feedback is so helpful for all of us in product, because as we're building our experiences, especially for those mid-market customers, in the variety of different industries that we serve, we incorporate this feedback and we build it into our system. So, to that comment about mid-market having more difficulty with the upgrade experience, we want to hear about that and we invest in our tools to help support them. So the upgrade configuration dashboard that I had mentioned previously, the cloud management portal that I mentioned previously, these were specific ideas from our user community that we took and we innovated and then we delivered on that request. And so the more that we hear this kind of feedback, ideas, that's really important to us. I think the community is a great place to go. We work with the community members and we listen to them. I also want to mention Epicor Ideas. It's the Epicor Ideas portal. It's basically a crowdsourcing platform where you can go and submit ideas and you can vote on them. All of our product managers are watching those and we incorporate that. And we haven't in the past done a great job of reporting back to everyone as to how we've incorporated those ideas. But we've been working on making sure that we're highlighting specific enhancements that come from our user community in the Epicor Ideas platform, and then we deliver it into our releases. When we do deliver releases, we also have feature flags, so you don't have to necessarily start using the new features that were involved if your business isn't ready for it. We have lots of resources available as part of the upgrade experience itself, such as plans, feature summaries, a sample test plan, and then that also helps, as you're determining whether or not you want your business to start using one of these at day 1 or day 15 or, not at all. That's okay too. We have those controls available within the system so that you can use it or not.
Right. Now here's an elephant in the room that I think is worth getting out on the table now, because I think this is something that, again, not just in the Epicor community, but we see it with other vendors that are themselves making the shift from on-prem first to cloud first. And that's, I don't think any of us are really disputing that's where the market is headed overall. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of when each vendor is gonna get there. But the comment here is around Epicor CEO 2 years ago at Insight said that we wouldn't be in this current situation. And 2 years, on one hand, 2 years can be an eternity in the technology space when things change as fast as it does. On the other hand, if you're a user, that was just 2 years ago. And now here we are, and now we've got to make the change. Jose, is this a common sentiment that you're hearing from the user community or as far as past promises and past direction that has now changed?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard some of it around that, right? There's a lot of emotion attached to the ERP because, like I said, it's the core of the organization. So yes, we absolutely have heard this particular comment in the community in the last week. I will say I don't believe that uh, Steve was lying when he said this 2 years ago, right? I do know that the market changes, right? And Epicor is an organization that has to shift with the times. So I don't necessarily believe that Steve was lying to us. I don't think that that's where we need to be at. I think what we need to focus is on how do we meet in the middle and solve the problem for the customers while trying to keep in mind what Epicor needs to keep their lights on, right? So I think there is a middle ground that we can all get to. Whether that is a subscription service where we can still have some control, but still gives us the SaaS ability, whatever that might be. And there's a lot of solutioning going on around the community. There's a lot of internal discussions, I'm sure, happening within Epicor, and we're looking forward to what's to come there. But I don't know that it really is helpful to say, hey, the CEO said this two years ago. Okay, yeah, he said that, right? And yes, some of us are kind of hurt and disappointed by the outcome. But at the same time, we have to understand that they're a business and they are responsible and responding to their shareholders, just like I am responsible to our shareholders. So I don't know if it's necessarily fair to, hold his feet to the fire to that statement he made, while understanding fully that the community is disappointed in the decision.
Yeah, that's really well said. Thank you for that perspective, because I think that's something I struggle with too. It's like, you think about, were there customers that bought Epicor because they had the option and they wanted to be on-prem, 2 years ago, and now it suddenly changes. I get the sense that it was more the legacy, like people that have been on-prem for a while, heard that message and thought, okay, cool, we've got a big runway here, when maybe it wasn't as long of a runway as they thought. What are your thoughts, Kerrie? I mean, could you explain to us, without getting into an economics course for us, but just, how does, because I kind of know how, different leaders are measured and what investors want. Private equity gets involved, as they have with Epicor. There's certain expectations around annual recurring revenue and the margins that come with that. I mean, tell us the business side of it, and not to dismiss what Jose just said, because that's really important. What customers think is really important, but we also have to understand, to Jose's point, what kind of pressure do you guys feel as a vendor that might have led you down this path?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad you brought this up. This, as you said, elephant in the room, this is something that I know a lot of people have rightfully been asking about and questioning. I do want to specify, this is not an end of life, nor is it like really a sunset, or we're forcing anybody to do anything. There is sustaining support available to those customers, and thousands of companies are currently running sustaining support today for legacy or previous on-premises or hosted solutions. So I do want to really emphasize that if you want to stay on premises, Epicor is here to support your business. We are. That said, yes, I don't think any of us could have seen just how quickly the pace of technology and investments have changed over the past few years. Certainly with the advent of AI, the cost of data centers and servers, this is all skyrocketing. And so in order for us to really continue to be a business that is highly competitive and stays ahead of the market to deliver on the responsibility for innovation and security that our customers expect, this was a move that we needed to make, a shift in our investment strategy that we needed to make for our business, our future resilience, and to ensure that we're going to be there for all of our customers for decades to come.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, there's some comments coming in around, can we make an idea to make on-prem here to stay indefinitely? So long live on-prem is the sentiment for some in the audience. And I do, and all kidding aside, let's go with this a second, because I've thought about this a lot, and I've actually had online debates and discussions with people around on-prem. Like, will on-prem come back? And part of me thinks that there will be another wave of on-prem just to counter some of the cloud-focused moves. But I think inevitably that's not sustainable, because what will happen is, in order for that on-prem software vendor to scale and to get investment money, they're going to want annual recurring revenue. They're going to want the subscription model. They're going to want the ease of deployment of cloud versus on-prem. It's more scalable as a business. So I have trouble seeing, I think even if on-prem, you were to say, is better fit for a lot of customers or some customers in the market, finding a sustainable long-term vendor ecosystem that could support that, I don't know. I just don't see how that works. And I don't know if that's where you guys landed, Kerrie. It's like, yeah, you could keep doing on-prem, you could keep spreading your R&D across different platforms, but ultimately, if you want to truly knock it out of the park and catch up to some competitors, continue moving ahead of other competitors of yours, you've got to consolidate some of that R&D.
That's
I
right.
imagine.
Yes, exactly. And I think actually this is a great idea to go to Epicor Ideas and to start a conversation, although I'm sure it's already there now, in regards to being on premises. In fact, I know it's there now. But it would be good to go in there and share your business needs and why you would want to stay on premises, because we want to take all of these ideas into account. And I will say, and I think Jose, you were kind of mentioning it or alluding to it, we are exploring hybrid options to see what could we do for our customers, those that want to have an on-premises instance for whatever reason, and how can we continue to innovate to solve those customer needs and have a new offering in the future for our customers. So please do go to Epicor Ideas, submit those, this is something that all of our product managers are watching, looking at, and we're taking it into account. So yes, I think it's a great idea to make an idea to stay on-prem.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just one more comment. I just realized we're up against time, so I'll wrap up here in a second. But OG on YouTube says ARR does not equal maintenance fees, ? And I just to clarify my point around how vendors need and want, investors need and want ARR. ARR for maintenance is a lot different than ARR for subscription fees. There's a lot more money in the subscription fees if we're being candid here, and I think that's the driver. In fact, one of the first comments we got, which is kind of funny, was the first comment that came in was an emoji of a smiley face with dollar signs, and that, I hate to kid about it, but that is the reality. Vendors need to make money. We all need to make money, right? That's why we're all here, and so it's a matter of finding that right balance that obviously supports everyone that's involved. So there's a lot more questions here, a lot of comments. I know Epicor, I'm sure, Kerrie, you and your team will be reading a lot of these comments that are coming in here, as well as in the EpiUsers.
All of them. We read all of them.
Yeah. So I appreciate you guys taking the time here. Here's more of a forward-looking question that I've already been accused of asking you at least one unfair question from one of the people in the chat that you shouldn't have asked Jose that. It wasn't fair. And I think it was when I was asking about what percentage of people you think will actually make the move to the cloud, which, to be fair, is not a fair question. Hopefully this one's a little more fair. And that is, if you had to read or predict the future, what do you think the Epicor and mid-market ERP space looks like in 5 years? Like after all this dust settles, people, we work through the change management, fear of change issues, and the good, the bad, the ugly of any sort of ERP deployment. What do you think this all looks like in 5 years?
I think we can get to a middle ground, right? And that's the hope of the community, right? I understand that as a vendor, they need to make money. The shift on revenue it makes sense, right? Kerrie, as you said, the cost of infrastructure on the cloud is skyrocketing, right? And that's a concern for us too. And so we understand all this, right? And I can see, to that point, the cost of infrastructure on the cloud is going up, which means my Epicor maintenance or my Epicor SaaS fees are going to go up too, right? So it's a little concerning there. But I do think there's a middle ground where we can get to a place where you guys or Epicor or the vendor is saving in R&D, deploying in a single way, while still giving us some of that control, right? Whether that is a hybrid approach of some sort, whether there is a shift on the way that the on-prem is seen, right? And there's some other competitors that are doing something like this, where you can still run and install your on-prem ERP via containers, via something that allows you guys to deploy in the cloud seamlessly and not maintain two code lines. As an engineer, hat tip to you, because maintaining two code lines in a single product, it is, as far as I know, and I'm very well versed in the space, it is a single product you guys are developing, and you are maintaining two parallel tracks within the same code line, right? And as an engineer, that is a nightmare scenario, right? So I get the shift, but I do think that there is a middle ground where we can all kind of agree and understand that we can keep some more control, we can lower our costs, hopefully, and you guys can, continue improving and moving R&D. I think in 5 years, AI is taking over the world. much to my chagrin. But I do think that there is a place for it, right? I don't think that a chatbot on your ERP is really all that helpful, but I do think automation around AI, using LLMs, using the MCP protocol, those type of things, coming in and having conversations with your ERP in a different way will be helpful. And I understand that it is an easier deployment path to do that in a SaaS offering. But I do think there's a middle ground, and I hope and I know that Epicor is listening, and we will get to something that we can all kind of agree to.
Middle ground. I think that's perfect the way you said that. Yep.
What do you think, Kerrie? Anything you'd add to that as far as where you think this all goes in 5 years and in the 5-year plan for Epicor, and how you hope you see your customer base in 5 years from now?
Yes. Yeah. Gosh, speaking of AI, who knows what's going to happen with AI? But yes, I do think so. With the cost of infrastructure really increasing, it's getting more and more difficult to even get access because of the supply chain issues. So much of it going to the large hyperscalers. And so I do think that we're going to be able to really continue to partner with our customers, create a great customer experience, provide those insights generated through AI or other types of analytical machine learning and types of solutions for our customers, so that we really continue to improve the clarity of supply chain decisions that they have to make in their business now and over the next 5 years.
All right, great conversation. Thank you both for being here today again, and thank you to the audience for the great questions. Really engaging conversation. We had so many comments and questions we didn't get to, so I apologize for that. We got to as many as we could, but we did cover a lot there, and very interesting to hear everyone's feedback on that. So we're going to debrief on the conversation and also get into the future of SAP and their position in the marketplace here in just a moment. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you're leading a digital transformation or ERP initiative and you want to avoid the costly mistakes that most organizations make, that's where Third Stage Consulting comes in. We are an independent and technology advisory firm, meaning that we don't sell software, we don't take commissions from vendors. Our only job is to protect your interests and be on your side. We help executives and project teams plan, deliver, and recover digital transformations and ERP projects, reducing risk, improving adoption, and delivering real business value. If you want clarity before you commit to your digital strategy, or if something feels off track to you, feel free to reach out to us at thirdstage-consulting.com, and my team and I would be happy to help.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney, focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 257. This is Eric Kimberly here with Darian Chwialkowski. And this is the tech agnostic podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including people, process, technology, and strategy. So, Darian, we just had Kerrie and Jose on the show to talk about Epicor's recent announcement and what it means to the mid-market ERP software vendors. What were your thoughts and takeaways from that?
Yeah, I thought it was a great conversation. First of all, I loved hearing two sides of the perspective, one coming from Epicor, what their reasoning behind what it was, and then just like their thoughts on how the customers can maintain or what their customers' choices still are, even with the changes that they are offering. And then just to hear Jose's perspective too, from more of the customer side of things and what the Epicor customers are saying and how they are feeling about these changes. So I thought that was a really dynamic and interesting conversation, and the audience clearly loved it too. There were so many questions and great engagement. I have a couple of follow-up questions though from this conversation that I'm wondering if you can just continue that thought on. So first of all, with cloud direction versus customer reality, at what point does industry direction become forced timing for customers? And do you think this is a case of that, or is Epicor being more flexible than you're seeing other vendors?
Well, I think Epicor has been and still is in many cases being more flexible than other vendors, but it is still, as Kerrie said, it's still a business that needs to be run. They have to make decisions that are right for them. And some customers, you could see it in the comments and questions that came through, especially if you read through the full chat there. Some customers are not happy. Some are frustrated. Some are fearful of the change and the perceived loss of flexibility, perceived loss of control, perceived loss of quality, increased cost. There's a lot of concerns there. And I think the ERP software industry as a whole is going to have to account for that. And I think we're in this weird spot right now where I think a lot of software vendors are feeling pressures from a lot of different angles. I mean, on one hand, they're getting investors and private equity partners and shareholders that are rewarding those that have more cloud adoption because of the annual recurring revenue that comes from that. It's very predictable. It's high margin. The switching costs are high. That's what investors want vendors to do. So leadership on down. And I know I've been privy to some compensation plans that some of these executives at different software vendors have, and they're rewarded very handsomely for making the shift to the cloud. And so honestly, part of me is surprised that it's taken Epicor a while to get to this point, because they have been, a resistor of that in some ways. They've always had these cloud solutions. They've been pushing cloud, but they haven't taken a step like this where they're taking a big step towards cloud first, potentially cloud only longer term. So I think, though, what's going to happen in the industry is I think the vendors are going to push that narrative and that model as far as the market will let them. So at some point, if they keep pushing, at some point, customers will have a backlash. And Jose made a really, really important point. He sort of mentioned it in passing, but I thought it was super insightful and something that I've been thinking a lot about too, that I've yet to hear anyone else talk about. And that is what happens when some big company somewhere has financial issues and they can't pay their cloud subscription bill, and software vendor cuts off access to their data, to all of their workflows, and basically shuts down their business. And that's going to happen. I mean, statistically, it's impossible that will not happen at some point in the future. It will happen. The question is going to become, will there be enough of a backlash? Will people anticipate that potentially happening? And then what will the response be? So I think vendors are going to keep pushing until either the market puts some guardrails in place and starts to push back, or as we're starting to see with the case of SAP and Microsoft and some of the other large vendors, you're starting to see regulators step in and start to take some action against that. I don't think Epicor is doing anything right now that warrants, regulatory action, but when you deal with big vendors with the size and scale of a larger vendor, I see why regulators like in the EU, for example, are stepping in to investigate whether or not this is antitrust behavior in the case of SAP. So anyway, Epicor is not there yet, but the whole market is going that direction. Just some vendors are going there more aggressively than others. It's going to be up to the market and or regulators to push back. And I don't know when that's going to happen, but it'll happen at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last question with this. I found it super interesting. Obviously, like we were talking about how Epicor obviously is a business and they need to keep their lights on and do what's best for them, make money, all those things. And I think everybody can understand that. One question with that, from the ERP vendor's perspective, can they remain competitive without consolidating R&D onto fewer platforms or onto the cloud?
That's a great question. And I don't know. I think probably not. I asked Kerrie something along those lines, a similar type of question. And she made the comment that, we as a company, Epicor, she said we've doubled our investment in R&D in recent years. And that, I don't doubt that. But the question is what if you were to spend that same amount of R&D, double that R&D number, and you invested all in one platform? Would that be better for the broader market? It certainly would make it easier to manage from a technical and product perspective on Epicor's side. I would speculate. And for most vendors, that's probably true. But I guess where I commiserate a bit with Epicor customers is Epicor has always had niche products, products that are focused on specific niches and verticals. So I wonder, how much consolidation they can really get away with, because I think their customers like the fact that they've got niche solutions. They've got flexibility on whether they go on-prem or cloud or hybrid or whatever. But now some of that is perceived to be getting lost. So I don't know. I don't know, to be honest with you, but I think I understand why customers are pushing back and why there's a backlash for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what a great conversation today. Like I said, I loved hearing from both perspectives, and I think a lot of the audience did as well.
Yeah. Hopefully you did, and I'd love to hear your feedback from the audience. Anything we didn't get to, or takeaways from what you think this means to the broader industry. But speaking of the broader industry, this isn't just about Epicor, but other vendors like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, and others are pushing very aggressively into the cloud. And as we just discussed, I think there's going to be some longer term consequences that are negative. I think there's going to be some blowback. I think there's going to be a backlash for some of this action, that this aggressive push to the cloud that the entire industry is going through right now. The pendulum is shifting really fast and heavy towards cloud, but I think the pendulum is going to swing back at some point, and there's going to be a backlash. And there was some comments actually in the chat during that discussion around, maybe there should be an on-prem only vendor out there, or maybe Epicor should promise just to stay on-prem. I think there actually will be that sort of backlash. I think someone somewhere will come up with a good mousetrap that's on-prem. It'll give customers a good option. It may not be as cool as cloud and AI-driven stuff, but it might be just good enough and stable and predictable enough for someone to invest in, or to want to pursue. But we'll have to wait and see. But the reason I say all this is because SAP is making decisions too on a bigger scale and a more aggressive scale than Epicor, that I think is going to hurt their customers, and I think it's going to threaten and compromise their position as a market leader. So I'm going to show you this video, and then we'll come back and chat about it. And as we're showing you the video, I'd love to hear your feedback too. If there's points you agree with or disagree with me on, I'd love to hear your feedback, because I know this is a controversial topic, and I know many of you will not agree with me, and some will. So I'd love to hear your feedback either way. So let's roll the video, and we'll come back and talk about it.
In the technology space right now, we see a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of disruption being caused by the mass migration to the cloud that SAP and other providers are pursuing right now. But SAP in particular is running into some legal and market issues that I think are going to create some headwinds for the company, and already are creating headwinds for the company, despite its high market valuation, its overall profitability and success right now here in late 2025 into 2026. Longer term, I think there's trouble in paradise brewing, and there's some early warning signs that you should be aware of if you're an SAP customer or thinking about becoming an SAP customer. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And before I dive into today's content, I also want to encourage you to download our independent, tech-agnostic, no BS guide to successful S/4HANA implementations. So if you're thinking about moving to S/4HANA, whether you're an existing SAP customer or you're moving to SAP for the first time potentially, I encourage you to read this guide. It's got great tips in it, objective tips on how to be successful with your S/4HANA implementation. It also shares a number of lessons learned from challenges and failures in the SAP space. So be sure to check that out. You can read that for free by scanning the QR code right here, or you can go to the links below. The first sign that there might be trouble in paradise in the world of SAP is in the EU in particular. Now, the EU, or the European Union, is investigating SAP for potential and alleged antitrust behavior. And this is a big deal even if you're not in Europe, because I think this is something that's going to spread to the rest of the world, and I think it's going to change the way that SAP operates now and going forward in the future, regardless of how this investigation shakes out in the next few years. But essentially what the EU is alleging is that SAP has made it extremely difficult for customers to use third-party options for maintenance. So the antitrust allegations are limited or focused on third-party support. And this is a really big deal, because many of you are probably paying 15 to 20% maintenance to SAP to support your ECC or maybe your R3 applications from the past. But there are also third-party providers out there that you could be deploying. There are companies like Rimini Street and Spinnaker, for example, that provide third-party support, oftentimes at a much lower cost than what SAP offers. In addition, you have the fact that SAP is trying to migrate customers to S/4HANA and away from ECC. So what they've done is they've cut off support and discontinued support for ECC as of 2030, which makes this an even bigger deal, this whole allegation of antitrust behavior in the third-party support market. Now, one example that the EU cites in terms of how SAP is operating is that they're making it difficult for customers to leverage third-party support because they're saying that if you do go to third-party support and decide that you want to come back later and go back to your SAP support, that you're not only going to have to pay for SAP support going forward, but you're going to have to back pay all the time that you spent hiring a third-party maintenance and support provider. So that's just one example that the EU cites as a reason why SAP is allegedly engaging in antitrust behavior. And the reason this is so important to you as a potential buyer is actually a mixed reason. One benefit is that this means that SAP is likely to back off its strong arm tactics of trying to force people to either use their support in the short term and or move to S/4HANA prematurely, potentially in some cases, before the 2030 deadline expires. And SAP is doing this out of survival. They're doing it because they don't want companies like Rimini Street and Spinnaker to give SAP customers a lifeline to extend the lifecycle of ECC, because they want them all moving to S/4HANA because, surprise, surprise, SAP makes more money off S/4HANA customers than they do the legacy ECC customers. So this EU investigation, I don't think is going to stop here. I think other global governments throughout the world are going to start investigating and putting pressure on SAP, being that it's the largest enterprise tech provider. And one thing I've always said is if SAP was selling to consumers, they would have been regulated a long time ago because of the way they treat their customers. So this is something to be aware of. I think there could be a benefit to it in the long term. I think there will be a benefit to SAP customers in giving them more options, because with this regulatory pressure, it's likely that SAP will have to back off and back down from their stance of trying to limit people's options in the SAP space. But the bad news for SAP customers is that this is SAP's MO. Their MO is to try and force you to do what's in their best interest, even if it's not in your best interest. So it's something to be aware of. And if you are moving to S/4HANA, it's just something you want to keep in mind as you move forward. Another sign that there's trouble in paradise in the world of SAP is Celonis' lawsuit against SAP. And if you're not familiar with this lawsuit, this is a suit that was filed in the US in late 2025. Celonis is a business process mining tool that offers SAP customers and non-SAP customers the option of using their software to mine business processes to gather metrics and information about how the technology is actually being used. And the whole reason you would use process mining software is to identify the inefficiencies, the variations in your business processes, and just understand the reality of how your business processes work within the system versus what someone might tell you is happening in the system. So business process mining is a really cool tool. Celonis is a great tool. But the problem here, and the reason Celonis is suing SAP, is because SAP has made it nearly impossible for Celonis to use their software with SAP. SAP has their own business process mining tool that they're promoting, and they're making it impossible in some cases for Celonis to be able to connect to SAP to be able to mine the software to provide the information that customers might want. So in other words, SAP is forcing their customers to use their own process mining tool and making it very difficult, if not impossible, to use a third-party process mining tool. And that's why Celonis is suing SAP. We're probably years away from this being resolved, but the early signs are positive for Celonis in that the case wasn't thrown out as SAP had hoped, and the case is moving forward in the US court system. So that's something to keep an eye on. But regardless of how this case shapes up, this is another sign that SAP's strong-arm tactics are getting them into regulatory trouble, and it's also getting them into hot water with their own customers, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. A really interesting case study I read recently is that there's a big company called Kingfish that is a global company with thousands of locations, and they are on SAP ECC. And they had long considered an upgrade to S/4HANA. And they were actually at a Gartner conference recently, and the CIO and other leaders within the organization gave a presentation about how they chose not to upgrade to S/4HANA and what they're doing instead of upgrading to S/4HANA. And this is super interesting because this is that hidden dark side of the SAP world that a lot of people won't talk about, and SAP doesn't want people talking about this stuff. But Kingfish came out as an SAP customer and talked about their refusal to move to S/4HANA and what they're doing instead. So long story short, they came out and said they are not moving to S/4HANA because it's going to cost them what they say to be 20 times more. And I don't know if that's a hyperbole or an exaggeration, but they said 20 times more. Why would they spend 20 times more on S4HANA when they're getting just enough value out of ECC to run their business. The other side of this too is that they wanted to focus on AI capabilities, and agentic AI in particular, and AI to help them make better decisions. And so they talked at the conference about how they're using AI tools, third-party AI tools on top of ECC to use the data they already have, the technology they already have, the technology they've paid for already, that's off the balance sheet and they're just paying maintenance for. They're using that existing technology to get more value out of it by getting a third-party AI tool in place. And they talked about some of the savings they were able to get by deploying these third-party tools, and that's the direction they're going. Now, they also talked in the presentation about being audited by SAP. And this is another strong arm tactic that the big vendors like SAP, and Oracle's guilty of this as well, even Microsoft sometimes will do it. Well, they'll audit your usage of the software to try and find reasons for you to pay more for the use of the software. And granted, contractually, it's within their right in most cases to do this. It just leaves a bad taste in customers' mouths. So I think the good news in this, even though it's just one example here with Kingfish, the good news is that organizations are starting to wake up and they're starting to take control of their own digital transformations. They're doing things on their timeline, using their strategy and their priorities. And you can certainly take SAP's advisement and recommendations, but it doesn't mean you have to follow their path just because they're pushing you so hard to move that direction. So I think the Kingfish case study should be a good motivator for all of us to take a look at our business, and if it makes sense to upgrade to S4HANA, then do it. But if it doesn't, then certainly do what you need to do to run your business and focus on your priorities. I spoke a moment ago about a specific case study of an ECC customer that was refusing to move to S4HANA despite SAP's best attempts. And this customer is not alone. It was recently revealed in a study that 40% of SAP customers have not yet started their journey to S4HANA. So despite years and years of strong arm tactics and incentives, the RISE program, discontinuing maintenance and support in 2030, despite all these tactics, 40% of customers still have not even started the migration to S4HANA. And that's not even counting the other organizations that maybe have started in earnest, but they're starting on a lighter scale and they're taking their time moving to S4HANA. That's not even counting that. These are the 40% that haven't even started the journey. So the good news for SAP is that they still have almost half their customer base that they could potentially be selling to, and they do continue to sell to. The bad news is I think this is an indicator of people's resistance to SAP's path forward. If SAP S4HANA public cloud was such a great product, you would see a lot more companies moving to it en masse. If it had such a strong business case, you would see people moving to it en masse. I recall the transition from R3 to ECC, and it seems as though SAP had a lot easier time convincing people to move from the mainframe-based R3 system to the more client-server, more modern at the time ECC software. But the S4HANA jump is just not resonating with the market, and I think a lot of that is because of the costs associated with it, the fact that companies have invested so heavily in customization and intellectual property within their ECC environment that they're not willing to give all that up and just defer to however SAP public cloud works. And if you're an organization that has any sort of complexity or uniqueness to you, you're gonna struggle with that migration to SAP public cloud because you have less flexibility, you don't have the depth of functionality within certain industries like manufacturing that you did have in ECC, especially when you consider your customized environment. So this is a very telling metric. It's another sign of trouble in paradise, and it's a sign that SAP might be on the wrong path strategically in the overall enterprise tech space. There are recent studies that show that 80 to 85% of people distrust big organizations, and they distrust big technology providers at an even higher rate. So this is a huge trust gap that we're seeing in the enterprise tech space. And more qualitatively speaking, just based on my experience, I have never seen this level of distrust, frustration, and anger towards enterprise technology providers as I'm seeing right now. And this may sound counterintuitive because in some ways, the technology companies are doing the coolest stuff they've ever done, building new AI capabilities. The cloud stuff is pretty cool, predictive analytics is cool. There's a lot of great capabilities and advancements that are happening that are improving at an exponentially faster rate day to day, but yet the companies are working against their customers' best interests. And the reason for this is twofold. There's two parts to this. One is that investors are rewarding heavily software vendors that move to the cloud quickly or move their customers to the cloud quickly. And they're also rewarding heavily software providers that invest in AI and roll out AI capabilities quickly. So this is a clear cloud and AI arms race that the technology vendors are on, which isn't a bad thing on the surface. But when you look under the hood, under the surface, you find that the technology vendors now have a conflicting self-interest that conflicts with the interests of customers. Not every customer needs to go to the cloud right now. Not every customer needs to be using AI right now. A lot of customers don't even have their ducks in a row or their house in order to be able to leverage AI even if they wanted to. So that disconnect between what investors want and what software vendors are focused on and what customers really need today and in the short term is very telling, and that's creating a level of distrust that I've never seen before. You add to the fact that you have a whole ecosystem of implementation partners, system integrators, resellers, technical consultants that focus on SAP. The big four, for example, all focus pretty heavily on S4HANA. So Deloitte, Accenture, KPMG, PwC, all those big consulting firms have big SAP practices, and their goal is to get you to implement SAP and go to S4HANA Cloud using their services, and that's understandable, but again, that doesn't necessarily align with what your best interest might be. So this conflict of interest in the industry is just growing, it's creating larger distrust, and I think that's creating a distrust of SAP that's at a higher rate from what we're seeing. People distrust SAP a lot more than they distrust other smaller second-tier software vendors in the space that might be a little bit more focused and might be a little less aggressive in their sales tactics. So these are all things to be aware of as you navigate the world of SAP, but I'd love to hear from you. If you're an SAP customer, what's your feedback for me? Have you found positives with working with them? Are there negatives? Are there things you agree or disagree with that I'm talking about here? I'd love to hear your feedback. And of course, if you're in the SAP ecosystem, I'd love to hear from you too. If you disagree with me or have other thoughts to add, please do. Please drop those in the chat or in the comments below. Love to hear your feedback.
So that was my video that I recently published on YouTube about SAP's future and how I think SAP's future is in question, at least as a dominant, the number one gold standard ERP vendor. I don't think they're going to go anywhere anytime soon, but I just don't think they're going to be as relevant longer term, or at least that's my case for it. That's my argument for it in the video. What were some of your thoughts and questions from that, Darian?
Yeah, my first initial thought was just their pressure tactics and how they're really triggering a real resistance. I think that's something that you've probably been talking about for a few years now. But I feel like maybe SAP and the customers are really starting to feel that now. And then the other main point I guess I took from it was that customers are starting to choose control over compliance. So instead of rushing to S4HANA, many organizations are extending ECC, layering AI, analytics on top of all the different things you mentioned, which I also found super interesting because that's part of the kickback that SAP is obviously seeing. I have a couple of follow-up questions for you on this. Like you said, I know we answered a question on this YouTube video earlier in this podcast, but I'm sure we had a lot of audience questions on that. So a couple of other questions I have to follow up are, you open by saying SAP's longtime dominance may be turning into a liability. What's the clearest early warning sign that tells you that's happening right now?
It's not a scientific, data-driven conclusion that I've landed at, to be clear, although there is plenty of data that supports it that's external to third stage. So for example, I think it was Gartner, I believe it was Gartner recently published a study that showed that most SAP customers had yet to start the transition to the cloud. And this is, 10 years in, or I'm sorry, not a majority of SAP customers have not started their transition to S4HANA, not necessarily cloud, although that SAP is pushing pretty hard to get people in the cloud, not on-prem S4HANA. But I think the warning signs beyond data points like that are even more powerful, more compelling for me and for our team is just seeing our own clients and how they're reacting to it. I mean, they're pretty pissed off, and we actually saw a little bit of it earlier in this episode when we're talking about Epicor. You saw some just pissed off people that are customers of Epicor's that aren't happy with the change, and we're seeing a lot of that, but just more on a bigger scale with SAP. There's a lot of really big enterprise companies that are clients of ours that are not happy with the way they're being treated by SAP, and they're not happy with the aggressive tactics to try and get them all to move not only to S4HANA, but to S4HANA Cloud. And a lot of these companies are perfectly happy with ECC. And this is the weird thing, is it's almost like SAP is a victim of its own success, and it's a victim of a product that they created in ECC that really hit the sweet spot for a lot of big companies because it was scalable. It was standardized enough, but it still had flexibility because you could customize and change things. Now you don't have that same ability. Yes, you can customize outside the core using BTP and other tools, but it's not the same. It's not the same level of flexibility that companies once had. And I know there's a lot in the SAP community, and this is where I think the real hidden problem is. This is my biggest data point potentially, is just the arrogance and the condescending nature and attitude that SAP's ecosystem has towards its own customers. I think that's ultimately what's going to bite them and kill them long term. Not kill them permanently or put them out of business necessarily, but it's going to make them a lot less relevant, because you talk to a lot of SAP consultants or a lot of SAP practitioner type people that grew up in the space, and they say, well, if a customer's not willing to go to S/4HANA and they're not willing to adopt clean core, then they're the problem. They're resisting change. They don't want to be future proof. They're just going to live with technical debt forever. And they make it's almost like gaslighting, like they're making the customer the problem. When the customer's telling SAP what they want, they're telling us what they want. And SAP, is pushing back and saying, well, no, we know better. We know best. We're SAP. We've got best practices. We've got clean core. We can eliminate your technical debt, blah, blah, blah. So I think that level, that arrogance is probably the biggest data point. It's hard to measure. I haven't seen any data that supports that observation, but it's a very real observation that I've seen a lot of in that space.
For sure. And you made a lot of great points there. I have one last question to kind of wrap this up. But for SAP customers specifically, or any vendors could fit in this bucket, feeling the pressure right now, what is the single biggest mistake you see executives make when deciding their next move?
I think the single biggest mistake that executives make when planning their next move is not thinking through the full suite, the full spectrum of implications of what they're deciding. So in other words, they take a one-sided view of maybe just the pros and the benefits of moving a certain direction without thinking about what are the long-term consequences of that same decision. And any decision an executive makes is probably going to be somewhat unpleasant, somewhat uncomfortable, because there's no easy answer, yet software vendors will try to sell it or pitch it as an easy answer. And, it's our job as tech agnostic advisors that are client side only. We know the vendors really well. We work with all these different solutions, but we're not representing vendors. We only represent clients. When we're on that side, we're able to ask those questions that a vendor is not able to, and we're able to expose and highlight some of the deficiencies or trade-offs that companies are going to make. And so that's the biggest thing, is just not understanding the full decision they're about to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what a great episode today. I really loved all the different conversations and all the updates that are going on.
Yeah, it was a fun conversation. I enjoyed it. It was fun to stir the pot a lot on this episode, even more than normal. I'd love to hear the audience's feedback though on all this, because the big theme here, a big theme was vendor control and vendor roadmaps versus customer needs and customer wants. And I think that's the conflict that we as an industry are facing right now, is customer needs are in direct conflict with vendor needs, and they're colliding, and we're working through the messiness of it all. And how's the dust going to settle, and what's this industry going to look like on the other side? That's a big question I'd love to hear the audience's thoughts on. So thank you for another great episode, Darian. Thank you to the audience for the great questions and feedback. Thank you to Jose and Kerrie for being here today as well, and being sports to talk about a very difficult topic. I really appreciate it. And again, every Wednesday you can find new episodes of this show. Just go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to keep up with new episodes and also to see past episodes as well. So hope you all have a great week, and we will see you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Take care.